As the Lilith Fair made its way across North America, the sense of community that Sarah McLachlan had hoped for was taking hold.
It's like summer camp. It's sense of community and camaraderie among women musicians especially, but also among all the men who are in the band and the men who are in the crew.
The Lilith Fair not only challenged sexism in the music industry, it also challenged some of the myths about how women relate to each other.
I think most people expect women to be competitive and even catty, and every woman that's here is really into it for the spirit of it, not just for the ticket sales or the exposure.
We are the Mutual Admiration Club right here.
These are the nicest girls on the tour.
Oh! There's some controversy. Those Indigo girls, they are such bitches. Oh my God!
Backstage, there was a distinctly girlish atmosphere.
I'm trying out my new do.
Oh, it's kind of tastes good. It kind of smells like Barbie dolls.
There's definitely a girliness to the tour.
It does smell like Barbie dolls.
You get so used to going and covering shows where it's like, you know, hey man, you know, where did you leave my guitar picks and where did you leave? But this was just like, you know, where's that MAC number 15 apricot sparkle eyeshadow? I need it, you know.
This is great. We're
It's Clinique.
Hot gloss?
Yeah, it is Clinique hot gloss.
Don't let your hair get in here.
Honey, last time I was on there, I was like, it wasn't coming off at all.
Yeah.
Since it is a girly tour.
The fun and intimacy the artists shared with each other backstage spilled on stage. The performers were letting down their guard with the audience.
I love my life.
Lilith Fair was a far cry from the variety shows in Homer, Alaska, where Jewel began her singing career as a child, performing with her parents. Jewel was raised in a log cabin with no heat or running water. Her parents divorced when she was 8 years old, and she stayed with her father and continued to perform. In her early teens, Jewel went to live with her mother. She was going through a desperate, soul-searching crisis.
I didn't want to wake up in the morning. I didn't have any passion at all, and it was having to face consciousness every day, very aware that I was doing something that I hated, just passing time.
She had always loved singing, so together she and her mother saved money to send Jewel to Interlochen, a performing arts school in Michigan. After graduating, she hopped a train to San Diego, where her mother had relocated. Jewel was broke, struggling, and once again desperate.
Couldn't afford food or toothpaste. I mean, we would scrape food off people's plates for our waitress and things like that.
Besides waitressing, Jewel went to work as a receptionist, where she says she was sexually harassed.
My boss was very attracted to me, and I wouldn't sleep with him. And it caused a lot of problems. But I was really hard-pressed for the job. I needed the job, and my boss fired me that day. I was just like, what am I gonna do, you know? And my mom came, down, and she was like, this is it. We're not gonna compromise anymore. We're gonna both live in our cars. I was like, what a relief. Thank God, I'll do it.
Believing it would solve at least some of their problems, Jewel and her mother moved into their cars. Now they wouldn't be beholden to anyone. Jewel's motto became, live your dream or die.
I was living in my car. It's like, I can either keep focusing on what I don't have and be there for the rest of my life, or I can, stay mercilessly focused on where change is possible. I mean, I don't think I could have survived living in a car, or, I have a lot of faith.
Jewel's faith and remarkable voice landed her gigs at local coffee houses.
My grandfather was a sailor, and he came onto this land.
I felt so alive. I was doing what I loved. I didn't feel degraded. I felt my pride, my dignity, and started learning how to play in front of people, playing guitar. I'd never done it before. The audiences they brought me food, they brought me poems, they let me know that what I was doing touched them.
Jewel was taken under the wing of Steve Poltz, a musician from the San Diego music scene.
Before I met him, I'd never listened to songwriting. I'd never thought of it as a craft.
Jewel and Steve Poltz co-wrote the song You Were Meant for Me, which would later become Jewel's signature tune.
I hear the clock, 6 a.m. I feel so far from where I'm at.
After 5 months of playing the coffee house circuit, Jewel was discovered. She was only 19 years old and still living in her car when she signed a deal with Atlantic Records.
I know you love me, and soon you will see you were meant for me, and I was meant for you.
In February 1995, she released her first album, Pieces of You. She toured relentlessly for a year and a half, sometimes playing 3 gigs a day. But Jewel went unnoticed. She was beginning to doubt herself again when she met Sean Penn.
He really believed in me and believed in my talent and really encouraged me to keep going. And I think he was kind of a life support at that time.
Penn not only believed in Jewel, he directed the original video for You Were Meant for Me. The video helped Jewel get noticed. Suddenly she caught on. Her record, which sat in stores gathering dust for more than a year, sold over 5 million copies.
I wrote the song when I was living in my car, sort of a lullaby to myself when I was afraid.
By age 23, Jewel's rags to riches story was an American dream come true.
I just want to say, never lose hope, guys. If this can happen for me, I think it could happen for anybody.
Jewel had become a star. In July 1997, she even graced the cover of Time magazine in an article about Lilith Fair and women in music.
I'm glad that the tour's gotten notice. At the same time, I just think it's silly to call us a gang. The cover of Time magazine, Jewel and the Gang, I mean, come on. Was Nirvana and Pearl Jam and Soundgarden ever called a gang?
The remarkable success of the Lilith Fair was bringing on a wave of media backlash. Reporters started to find things to criticize about the tour. The attitude, the exclusion of men, the lack of musical diversity in the artist lineup.
You needed to have like the voices of all women out there. I mean, women in music is not a genre. It is not a lilting acoustic genre. There's like Hole, there's Courtney Love, there's L7, there's Liz Phair.
You had a lineup where there are no R&B acts, no soul singers, at a time when R&B dominates the singles charts.
Whether the criticism was legitimate or not, nothing seemed to dampen the spirit of the crowd.
When you have the crowd and it's pouring down rain and the crowd just cheers it on and wants more because it's a big moment for them and they feel what the artist is doing, that's magical. So 1 writer, 2 writers, they just didn't get it. That's too bad.
The struggle is trying to explain to people day in and day out what it's all about who just don't want to see it for what it is. It's a great festival. It's great music. It's really good-spirited, but a lot of people have a really hard time dealing with that. They want to find something ugly.
It happens with any celebrity that gains a certain kind of stature. They're loved, and then they're brought down. And it was bound to happen with Lilith, especially since it started being elevated to this groundbreaking, this unique, this kind of powerful all-women's festival.
Gotta feel like hell tonight. The tears of rage I cannot hide. I'll be the last to help you understand. Are you strong enough to be my man?
The media backlash that followed the incredible hype of the tour mirrored what had happened to Sheryl Crow earlier in her career.
Because I became well-known so quickly, people weren't sure if they could believe that I was an artist. People perceived me as a pop diva, and that's part of the hazards, I guess, of how big the media has become. It can create such a big star, but at the same time, they can also sort of rip someone apart.
Under a siege of criticism, the artist closed ranks and together defended Lilith Fair.
I mean, it's like, hey, we're getting started, I don't think there's an agenda going on here.
to exclude anyone in particular except men, you know, and only in the headliner status.
To anyone who experienced it, it was clear. The final days of the Lilith Fair were not about media attention, or ticket sales, or crowds. The final days were about the great accomplishment of pulling off the festival, the bonds between the artists and music. Next, the underdog has its day.
Lilith went from being what's Lilith to part of the vernacular.
When Behind the Music continues.